Time and culture. Although time was and is created by God, our conceptions of time are culturally constructed and culturally bound. Our understandings and habits of time are influenced by our family cultures, our employment cultures, our racial, ethnic, and geographic cultures. Consider, for example, the alternative way Saint Benedict engaged time in his rule, written around 530 CE, as a guide for monks to engage in the communal life and endeavor towards a union of the soul with God. Benedict sought to outline a means of fraternal living that regulated time in a manner that it might have theological significance. Benedict advocated for an alternative rhythm of the day wherein the length of an hour varied and the time of spiritual practices shifted based upon the fluctuating hours of daylight and night. Not all hours were 60 minutes, and not all days were 24 hours. Although Benedictine monks were credited with creating clocks, they did not do so in order to capture discrete abstract units of time that could be extrapolated from the particularities of any given situation and used for the glory of human beings. Rather, they created clocks in order to pace the events of the day, the spiritual practices that grounded their relationship with God. Benedict's conception of time was theologically grounded, yet it was culturally constructed to fit with and facilitate the monastic way of life. Or imagine, for example, that you were living in 1582 when Pope Gregory XIII introduced what is now known as the Gregorian calendar. This calendar refined the traditionally employed Julian calendar in order to assure that Easter was celebrated in the season or time established by the early church. The Gregorian calendar corrected the length of the calendar year by 0.002%, but not all countries adopted the calendar at the same time. For example, it was not until 1752 that England first officially adopted the Gregorian calendar, requiring the country to lose 11 days. When the people went to bed, it was September the 2nd, but when they woke up, it was September the 14th. Cultural constructions of time are used to help people, like the Benedictines, but also to oppress individuals and groups whose conceptions of time differ. For example, Western and European conceptions of time were forced upon the colonized indigenous peoples of Africa and the Americas. The different way of engaging time in such cultures resulted in the native people being considered lazy or unproductive. The European or Western clock became the standard, and the colonized were placed in the position of otherness based on the perceived temporal weaknesses that they had, which was what was thought of from the perspective of European cultures. Cultural constructions of time are used to marginalize others, including citizens of two-thirds world countries, individuals with mental and physical disabilities, and people who attempt to live outside the hegemonic neoliberal capitalist agenda, wherein time means productivity, productivity means money, and only then are you of any worth. Time leads to productivity, leads to money, and leads to worth. Cultural constructions of time can be oppressive and lead us to believe that we have less time, but they can also be liberating and facilitate the belief that we have more time. Consider the invitation Henry Nouwen received upon arriving in Cork Island in the midst of a chaotic travel itinerary during his sabbatical year and just 1 month prior to his death. As evidenced in his journal accounts, Narwin, when he arrived in Ireland, Ireland invited him to slow down, and this is what he wrote. Cork, Wednesday, August the 21st. Every time I am in Ireland, I am struck with a different rhythm of life. Because of my jet lag, I decided to sleep in until 9 a.m. And when I arrived at the breakfast table at 9:30, I was one of the first. No hurry, no urgencies. As they say in Ireland, God created time and He created plenty of it. The culture of time among children also encourages the belief that time is abundant. Children, for example, often view time as expansive and immeasurable rather than linear and limited. Children live in the present, far less concerned about the past or the future than most adults. In their hours of prayer and in their hours of play, most children are not anxious that bedtime will come. Most children are fully present in the what is, as opposed to focusing on the what was or what will be. Also, we can think about agrarian societies and how time was structured when the hours of daylight continuously shortened in approach of the winter solstice, and yet the chores were exactly the same as the day before. Did those farmers not experience the pressures of limited time? In order to learn to relate better to time as God's time, not culture's time, we are aided in uncovering theological and scriptural wisdom about time. The risk of viewing time as a cultural construction is that we may be tempted to romanticize past cultural constructions of time. As we struggle to accomplish our ever-expanding to-do lists, we may find ourselves longing for a lost golden age, a time in the past when people purportedly had less pressure and experienced fewer demands on their time.